From ticket transparency to click-to-cancel rights and a junk fee ban. Thanks to last year's legislations, Minnesota's consumers have more protections this year. Now there's a new effort to add at least one more law to the list. I'm now joined by a senator who has signed on to the bill, showing his support for the creation of a consumer protection restitution account. Republican Senator Mark Koran. Senator, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Senator, you're not part of the Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee, but you have long advocated for stronger cybersecurity protections for Minnesotans. How do those two areas intersect?
So I spent my first 4 years on on commerce, so consumer protection and get off of it. But it hasn't changed my interest in especially around technology and how does it impact people. And today, it's one of the primary methods that people are being used to be swindled and or influenced in so many ways. So I haven't changed that. So I signed on to this bill because I think it's great when people see consumers have been protected. We get a variety of sources where in vehicles that we use to make sure that they're taken care of or protected from a financial perspective, from access and information, from your home and your personal and your work use. All of those things come into play. But when these stories hit the headlines, today most don't understand that any of those financial rewards actually go to the state general fund. Say the Attorney General finds somebody and they should take the appropriate action, and they go into the general fund. I signed on to this bill because its entire intent is to make sure that anything that's collected, how do we get it to the people who are actually harmed, which are the citizens of Minnesota?
Now, this bill would add on to the protections we currently have in place. Why don't you take me through some of those and the success we've seen from them?
Well, there's a whole variety. I don't know if I can take it from the whole host of issues, but they're many and varied, right? Because from youth gaming, right? I think Juul, I think there's some tobacco issues. There's a whole host of things that people either know or they don't know in going after consumer protections where they've been taken unfair advantage either through some technology, a product, advertising, or otherwise. Some of those don't lead to financial rewards, but those that do should actually go to the people who are harmed. And so that to me is why I signed on. But I do have some concerns on how we do manage that in the future to make sure we understand how do we get it back to the people and make sure that most of it goes back.
Well, so talking about the bill that's before the Senate now, Senate File 447, do you think that it will just sail through, or will the legislation encounter any issues?
I think it might. I think the intent is great. That's why I signed on to it. But I do have concerns. The Attorney General's office would manage those things. Today, I'm concerned about the lack of transparency in that office. For us to understand, I believe our intent is to make sure that we absorb the costs, right, to prosecute and make sure we correct the harm. But we don't have any transparency today to make sure that how those costs are determined and then to make sure that the dollars actually get back to the citizens or the victim in this particular case. So there's a variety of, those are the concerns I have about all legislation. You can have the greatest intent, but implementation matters, and what we want is a transparency across all government. And today the Attorney General's office leaves us some pause because they have broken kind of a 40-plus year standard of cases that they're involved in, investigations, when they get to a certain point, that we have access to that information so we can understand and know government played the appropriate role, acted within the guidelines and the expectations, but the transparency is what builds trust to all of our citizens and certainly the legislature when we go to fund or grant somebody additional capabilities to be able to pursue and or in this case through an enforcement action deliver those funds to the actual citizens who are harmed.
So would you think it's fair to say that your stance on 447 is it's a great start that we can build upon?
Yep, I love the concept. How do we build around the guardrails and guidelines to make sure that we have the transparency to ensure all agency, any agency, certainly the Attorney General's office, operates in the manner in which we intended. And so today, he doesn't allow the transparency. He has received the court ruling that allows him to determine, and it kind of broke a 40-year standard to build trust in that agency for anything we ask them to do. This would be just a new capability. I like the idea again. no general fund dollars, let's get them to the people. But we also have to have the transparency as legislators and citizens to know that it was operated and run the way it should be.
You talked about trust in our state systems. There's a federal system that also looks out for consumer protections, but it's been in the headlines recently. There's been some work stoppage there. How will that impact us here in Minnesota?
So we already have a wide variety of services in Minnesota for which it doesn't impact us there. And at the federal level, prior to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, we had 5 other agencies who had the consumer finance protection responsibilities. And so I see it as a reconfiguring. Those consumer protections don't go away. They'll likely be reassigned to another existing agency. Remember, there are 5 separate agencies that manage our large financial institutions prior to the creation of the the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. And so I think it's much like Minnesota. Governor Walz is reconfiguring some of the criminal investigation in the commerce or consumer finance or consumer protections, moving them into the BCA today. So it's really no different than what we're doing here, taking a different look at it, reconfiguring the operations, moving from 5, we had 5 agencies previously, now there was 6. Maybe we'll just go back to 5, or maybe we'll go back to 3 that will allow us to continue to provide the consumer protection that's needed.
Senator, we've talked about what the state can do. We've talked about the federal agencies. What can consumers themselves do?
And today it's a challenging world. So when you look at the threats, and it's always kind of deemed, we're dealing with this from a financial perspective, but it really is about access to information, control your home computer to the supercomputer you keep in your pocket, and then access. How are you being solicited today with phishing scams, ransomware scam, all of those things, DNS, denial of service, all of those things are in place today that provide and are financially harmful. You add AI into the world, and those demands or those threats are growing exponentially. And so that's where for me, I'm involved I'm in the cybersecurity task force. I've been involved in all the technology. I'm a process guy, not a technology guy. But what do we do when AI, how is it applied here? And I have, my personal political bias is that I haven't met an AI that isn't biased yet. And so then the bias is one thing, so what information do you see when? But the assault and threat on our younger children and our elder population is significant. In our younger population, I meet with the Googles and those that come through, and they actually have a belief that they are required to provide access to the internet for a 13-year-old with or without parental consent. And so for me, I would have a huge issue with that. I tell them they're wrong, but that belief is pervasive in some lawsuits they've been able to facilitate. Then you have on the senior citizen side, you think about the elderly, and I'm 61 soon, the grandma scam, ransom scams. Grandma's receives a call from their grandson who's in the Caribbean islands on vacation. With AI, they'll be able to emulate the actual physical presence of their grandchild and the voice to try and convince them to commit a financial crime or theft through swindle and to go grab $20,000 in gift cards at Target. And so those threats are coming, they're varied, and they're coming more quickly than ever. So it's about, on your phones, are you cybersecurity, or do you have security baked in? Do your updates, your home computers, all of those things are pervasive, but it's always going to come down to what about the education of the user? Whether they're a child, somebody's my age, my grandchildren, my kids, or somebody's much older than me, technology is in almost every facet of their life, whether they want it or not. And today, that's what we worry about, and that's what we focus on all the time. And then we get to the other side. How do we protect us serving in the legislative role? How do we protect our assets and critical services and the threats that are continuous and nonstop to make sure vital services are uninterrupted to all of our citizens, from consumer finance and protection to your roads to energy and to our wastewater or our water infrastructure.
Senator, are there any final thoughts on this topic you'd like to share?
No, I think I covered to me, I think the greatest growing threat is a threat on our children, the youngest generation, who kind of know no bounds, and information is forever. And I'm not sure they understand that, know it, It will be life-changing, always wonderful when it works well and used for great intent. Our job is to try and protect them from themselves and do everything we can to provide consumer protection at the state level where it's appropriate. And going back to our bill, when we do have great harm, and let's make sure it gets to the consumers who are actually harmed.
Senator, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. It was my pleasure.